I remember the sound before I remember the pain. Metal screaming against wind, the whole sky tilting sideways, and then water rushing up to meet me like it wanted to swallow me whole. That is how my story begins. My name is Naira, and I am Kesh. Among the stars, my kind are known for our fox-like shape, our fur that shifts color with our mood, and the twin tails we use to steady ourselves in flight. On the night I am about to tell you about, my fur had turned the color of ash, because I was more frightened than I had ever been in my short life. I was barely out of my second molt, still learning to fly the long routes between outposts, when a meteor storm caught my transport skiff off guard. The hull cracked, the engines screamed, and then I was falling, spinning down through thick gray clouds toward a planet I had never been taught the name of. A cold, rain-soaked world with jagged coastlines and endless gray ocean. I hit the water first, then the rocks, then finally the sand, and I do not remember much after that except cold. A cold that got into my fur and my bones and refused to leave. My people had told stories about this part of the galaxy. They said the beings who lived on rain-soaked coastal worlds were solitary and suspicious, quick to turn away anything strange, quicker still to turn a spear on it. I believed those stories the way young ones always believe the warnings of their elders. Completely without question, because I had nothing else to measure them against. So when I dragged myself up out of the surf, broken and shivering, and saw a tall shape standing on the rocks above the beach, I did not call out for help. I tried to hide instead, the way a wounded animal hides, certain that discovery meant death. I did not get far. My legs would not hold me, and I collapsed against a tide pool, my strength gone, my colors fading to a dull gray that in my kind means something between fear and surrender. The last thing I saw before my eyes closed was a light, swinging back and forth in the dark like a slow heartbeat. A lighthouse. I woke to warmth. That alone told me I was not where I expected to be. Not dead, not still on the freezing sand, but wrapped in something soft, lying near a low fire that crackled and popped in an old iron stove. My fur, I noticed, had returned to a pale gold, the color that means safety among my kind, though I did not yet understand why my body trusted this place before my mind did. A woman sat nearby in a worn chair, mending a fishing net with slow, patient hands. She was older, her hair silvered, her face weathered like driftwood that had spent years being shaped by the sea. When she noticed my eyes open, she did not startle. She did not reach for a weapon or call out in alarm. She simply set down her net and spoke, her voice low and even, the way you might speak to a bird you did not want to frighten off a windowsill. "There you are," she said. "Wasn't sure you'd wake up at all, out there in that surf." I understood nothing of her words at first. My translator had been damaged in the crash, but I understood her tone completely. Calm, unhurried, no threat hidden anywhere in it. Her name, I would later learn, was Marin Voss, and she was the keeper of the lighthouse at the edge of a fishing village called Thornmere. She had lived alone on that rocky point for 11 years, tending the light every night so that boats far out on the water would know which way was home. For 3 days while a storm raged outside in my wings. Yes, we have wings too, small ones, more for gliding than true flight. Slowly knit themselves back together. I stayed hidden in a spare room off her kitchen. She brought me broth and dried fish, and though I flinched every time she came near, she never once raised her voice or her hand. She simply left the food, said a few quiet words, and gave me room to decide on my own time whether I was ready to trust her. On the third night, my translator sputtered back to life, and for the first time I could understand her. "You're a long way from home, I'd wager," she said. Not really a question at all. "I fell," I answered, my voice small and strange to my own ears. "Out of the sky." She almost smiled at that. "Most interesting things do, one way or another." I asked her, eventually, why she had brought me in instead of leaving me on the beach, or reporting me to whatever authorities governed her strange, wet world. She was quiet for a long moment, looking toward a shelf near the window where a photograph sat in a cracked frame. A younger version of her, standing beside a man in a fisherman's coat, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. "Lost my husband to this sea," she said finally. "Boat went down in a storm just like the one that brought you here. Nobody came for him in time. I promised myself, after that, I'd never let anything wash up on my shore and go unhelped again. Didn't much matter what shape it came in. I did not have words then for what that meant to me. Where I came from, grief was something you guarded fiercely, something you did not let touch the people who had caused you no harm. But here was a woman who had let her deepest loss turn into an open door instead of a locked one. On the 5th day, trouble found us. I heard the low thrum of an engine before Marin did. A patrol skiff from the village, drawn by strange readings, picked up along the coast. My fur went the color of ash again, all my old fears rushing back at once. Marin didn't hesitate. She walked out onto the rocks in the wind and rain without even pulling on her coat, planting herself between the approaching boat and her own front door. "Nothing out here but an old woman and her lighthouse," she called out over the wind. "Whatever you're looking for, it isn't trouble, and it isn't leaving with you." The men in the skiff argued, gestured at their instruments, pointed toward her house. Marin did not move an inch. "You want to take something off my shore," she said. "You'll have to go through me first. That's not new. Ask anyone in Thornmere how many years I've said the same thing about that light." Eventually, grumbling, they turned the skiff around and disappeared back into the gray. Marin stood watching until the engine sound faded completely, then walked back inside, shaking rain from her hair as if nothing extraordinary had happened at all. I realized, watching her settle back into her chair, that she had stood alone and unarmed between me and people who might have hurt me, for no reason except that she had decided, long before I ever fell out of the sky, that kindness was worth defending, even when nobody was watching, even when it cost her something. The storm broke on the 7th day. My wings had healed enough to carry me, and standing on the rocks in the pale morning light, I heard the distant hum of a Kesh rescue cruiser descending through the clouds, sent to search for their lost transport skiff. Marin rested a hand briefly on my shoulder as we watched it land. "Go on then," she said softly. "Your people have come for you." I hesitated, looking back at the little lighthouse that had kept me warm through the worst days of my life. "Will they hurt you?" I asked, old fear creeping back into my voice. She only smiled. "Not if you tell them the truth." So I did. I walked forward alone, my fur glowing pale gold despite my racing heart, and stood between my armed kin and the woman who had saved me. I told them everything. About the crash, about the door that opened instead of staying shut, about a woman who had turned her own grief into a promise to help whatever the sea brought her. I told them the old stories about this world were not entirely wrong, but they were not entirely true either. My kin lowered their weapons slowly, uncertain but listening. Before I left, Marin pressed a small carved wooden fox into my paws. Something she'd whittled, she admitted, during the long nights while I slept off my injuries. "Something to remember the shore by," she said. "I have carried it with me every day since. And when young ones of my own kind ask me why I no longer fear the coastal worlds the old stories warned us about, I do not answer with arguments. I simply hold up the small wooden fox, worn smooth now from years of careful keeping, and tell them, this is what grief can become in the right hands. Even after loss, even after the sea takes something precious. Some choose to keep the light burning anyway, for whatever washes up next.